Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Odietis. This episode of Nos Odietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Odietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ruidíaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That Porter says cheated.
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another episode of Nos Odietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. That's you. We're recording on Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. The Sounders have been plodding along for about 3 months now, picking up results, but rarely playing anything like inspiring soccer. Last week, it felt like something finally changed. First, there was a really good performance against Minnesota United. They followed that up with an awful half against Houston Dynamo, only to come roaring back to pull out a 2-2 tie. Saturday's game was a bit of both. They started strong, but were tied 0-0 going into the 65th minute. That's when Jackson Reagan made a rather silly mistake, making a poor pass under no pressure that got picked off and quickly deposited into the goal. Compounding the mistake, Leo Chu took too long coming off the pitch, which meant Paul Rothrock had to wait a minute to enter. And almost as soon as Rothrock got on the field, Dallas added another goal. A few weeks ago, that would have surely been the end of the Sounders. Another 2-0 loss that would have felt like an absolute gut punch. Instead, they responded with 3 unanswered goals. The first was from Raúl Ruidíaz, who scored probably his most repeatable goal of the season off an Albert Rusnak assist. 10 minutes later, Jordan Morris snapped in a header off a Rusnak corner kick to tie it up. Then, in the 4th minute of stoppage time, Obed Vargas threaded a perfect through ball to Morris, who floated it over the goalkeeper to secure all 3 points. It was the Sounders' first 7-point week of the season and puts them in a really nice position as they have their next 2 and 4 of their next 5 all at home, as they sit just 4 points out of the number 5 spot in the Western Conference. Of course, we also found out on Tuesday that all will not be quite so well in the Sounders locker room, but we'll get to that a bit later. For now, Aaron, we're feeling pretty good, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the most positive I felt about the team this season, although maybe I'll feel differently by the end of the show and we talk through the other stuff you mentioned. But I think that the Minnesota game was the kind of, and we've talked about the Minnesota game, so I won't spend too much time on it, but it was the kind of performance I think we've been wanting to see all year. Dominated every phase of the game, not a lot of doubt about the outcome. Just a very comprehensive win. Then the Houston game, short rest, a lot of tired guys, a lot of heavy legs in that game. Go behind 2-0. I would not have blamed anyone in the world for turning that game off at that point. And frankly, as much as I thought a point in that game was feasible, I wasn't all that upset about it. It's midweek, you're traveling, it's hot, whatever. Come back and win at home. And then they do something that they just haven't shown a propensity for doing all year, which is shaking off those mistakes and just sort of gritting it out and willing themselves to a goal and then another. So really encouraging performance there. And then, against Dallas, more of the same and going that step further and getting that win in a game that I think was, for all intents and purposes, was a must-win game, right? You have to beat that.
If they don't win that Dallas game, I suppose if they had gotten the tie in the context of falling behind 2-0, maybe you can talk yourself into building some momentum. But they came into that game absolutely needing 3 points.
Yeah. I think that's a game where if everything is going pretty well and you're happy with where you're on the table and you go down 2-0 and come back and get the draw, you can be okay with that. In the Sounders situation where they have to start winning games at home, it's what we've talked about, right? Giving people a reason to want to come to the games, seeing a comeback like that, seeing that kind of excitement, giving them FOMO again about, man, I love this team when they're fun to watch and when they're giving me moments that I'm going to remember. I think that was super important. I didn't think they played poorly at all against Dallas. I think this was another game against Houston in that first half. Awful performance against Houston in that first half. Not a great performance in the second half, but a very gutsy performance, a very professional performance.
Yeah.
Against Dallas, aside from the 15 minutes where they gave up those 2 goals, I thought they were actually quite good most of the night.
It was really the 5 minutes where they gave up the first goal in the 66th and the second in the 70th. And really, I thought you take those 5 minutes out of the game and it was a really good performance.
Yeah.
And both goals were just really bad mistakes. Like I said, Jackson Reagan giving that ball away under no pressure. I'm not quite sure what he's doing there. And they got punished on that one. And then the second one, just sort of sloppy defending. Like they're in a set defense. There's no reason they should be letting Peter Musa get an open look like he did. And, I guess you can argue that maybe Steph could have saved that shot. He did get an arm on it, but your $10 million striker gets an open look from 8 yards out. It's going to end up in the goal most of the time. So I don't know. I really thought this out. I wouldn't rewatch the game, and I was really encouraged by most of what I saw through most of it. Now, was I expecting them to come roaring back with 3 goals? No, but once Ruidíaz scored, there was this sort of like, okay, here we go. Yeah, this might happen, and then for Jordan Morris to score 2 of those goals, I mean, all of a sudden Jordan Morris on paper having a perfectly fine season, 7 goals through 20 games. It's like not world beater stuff, but no one's really complaining about 7 goals through 20 games. Similarly, Albert Rusnak now on 9 assists.
Yeah.
Rusnak, I thought, looked great in this one. There was a lot of good performances this week, and I think that's what I really came out of this one feeling good about, is just that all of a sudden there's pieces that make sense together. I thought the biggest revelation of this week, probably Paul Rothrock, who apparently is just like an Energizer bunny and can, he's like maybe a little Mike Facito-esque in his contributions, but I'm not saying Paul Rothrock is a 90-minute player or anything, but I thought he was another key element of the comeback. Like he came in around the 70th minute or so against Dallas, and he gave the Sounders exactly what they needed in that one.
Yeah, I think that sometimes what you do need is a guy who is solid enough that he's not going to do anything to hurt you, and who has that kind of tenacity and that sort of, I hate the term gritty because of the connotations it has, but that sort of attitude about the game, who is just going to try to make things happen and try to force things to happen and cause problems for a defense that's, I think FC Dallas was feeling a bit under pressure and probably a bit tired themselves, and having a guy like that can, come in and do those kinds of things. And then against Houston, I mean, obviously he just willed that first goal. He was chasing down a lost cause in the first place. Shot gets saved. He's not gonna give up on the play. And just that kind of attitude is something that I think the Sounders have been missing since that 5-game stretch at the beginning of the season, where they couldn't buy a goal, couldn't buy a win. I think that sort of positive attitude and that sort of belief is just really has been the missing ingredient in a lot of games this season. And, I don't want to give him credit for turning everything around, because A, it's too early to say that everything has been turned around, and B, like the others guys have to buy in as well. But I think it's pretty clear that his performance against Houston, especially, I think, has been, just sort of instrumental in lifting the spirits of the team.
Yeah. No, and it seems like he's, one of my favorite images from that game on Saturday was after Morris scores. There's this image of Rothrock sort of trailing the play, and he's got his head back and his arms out, and there's it's a kind of this joy that you can feel that I can't help but think is infectious. That, he's clearly the happiest guy in the world just to be there. And, the Sounders don't have a lot of guys who are sort of just happy to be there. And they have a lot of, talented players or whatever. But sometimes you need a player who's just willing to let it all out and say, like, yeah, I'm riding this high as long as I can keep it going. He's under no illusions that he's going somewhere else. Like this is the pinnacle, really, right, for Paul Rothrock. And I think that's great. I mean, they need someone like that. And yeah, I think that's, it's been great to see. I think just seeing him be this big of a contributing factor. But if you pull back a little, you did the math on this. You go all the way back to their first win, which was way back on April 6th. So basically the last 3 months of the season. You put it all together, not bad, not too bad, not necessarily world beaters, but not bad.
Yeah, I think it's 1.53 points per game, pace like that, which would put them even with Minnesota United. I know that it would put them even with Minnesota United. If it's not 1.53, it's whatever Minnesota United has. Right. So yeah, I mean, they're playing like a middle of the road kind of team. Since the I think in the last 11 games, they're at a bit higher clip than that. I think they've got 19 in their last 11, right? Which is
1.7 or so.
Yeah, getting closer to where they want to be. I think that this is a average to good MLS team right now, and they're playing like that. And I think that the positive thing is that they're starting to show signs that they can get out of that average category, get rid of the hyphen, just be a good MLS team.
Right.
And, if they can get Pedro de la Vega healthy, we'll see. I think that he was expected to be the guy that kind of made everything click, to be that force multiplier kind of player. And if he can get there, maybe they have a chance to be better than good. Who knows? But if this is their ceiling, right? If this is as good as it gets, that's still a team worth watching. That's still a team worth tuning in for and not feeling awful about it. And I think it's not all that anybody's asking. It's certainly not all we should be asking, but it's certainly better than
what we were going through for the first first couple months of the season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is the team, admittedly, that still hasn't won consecutive games all year. You got to go, back to last year to find the time the Sounders last won consecutive games. That's, so like there's caveats here, right? They've only had a 3-game unbeaten streak twice this year. This is just their second 3-game unbeaten streak. So, momentum has been hard to come by, and they haven't put together an extended run of success yet. But this is the week where I started to feel like it was building. It felt sustainable. It felt fun. Like this was easily the most fun week of the season. Would you agree? Yeah, I mean, it was.
Sorry,
they were scoring.
I was nodding.
Yes, you were nodding. They scored multiple goals, 3 straight games. Which again, these are low bars. I don't want to overstate this. I realize these are low bars, but they scored multiple goals for the 3 games in a row. I'll take that. If they, this is not a team that I don't think is going to score in boatloads, but if they can average 1.5, 1.7 goals per game, I mean, I'll take that right now.
Yeah, I think that is what we kind of expected them to do coming into the season, was be a team that scored enough to win. Unfortunately, I think their defense is not quite as good, maybe as we thought. It's certainly, I think, a good defense. I think probably one of the better ones in the league, probably in like the top third in the league, but it's not the historically elite defense maybe than it looked like it was last year.
Right.
And so I think that's why they've been average to good instead of really, really good, instead of, cup contenders so far. But I think that the way that we talk about this team and this season, we being you and I, and we also being the royal we, right? I don't think that that's the correct term there, but you probably know what I mean. Probably should shift away from talking
the collective
we, the actual we, the literal we, right?
Right. Yes.
Should probably shift a little bit. I don't think this is a bad team. I think it's pretty clear they're not a bad team. I think they're a flawed team that has some structural issues, that has had some really bad luck that kind of put them in a hole to start the season. But, I think that going into every game expecting to lose, probably not the most rational way to think about this team right now. And I think getting 2 wins in a row at home, it can't be said enough how much that has helped the mood.
Yes.
If they can play like an average MLS team at home and continue playing as well as they have on the road, I think you brought this up last week, they would be in pretty good shape. I think everybody wants and I think has a right to expect that they should play better than an average MLS team at home, that they have a home field advantage that they should be actually taking advantage of. And I get that, but even getting to average is just a monstrous improvement.
Right. And so that's sort of like what we're working from here. One player who I do think has been elite, who's been legitimately elite, at least in the last 2 home games, João Paulo, who I feel like, it's very funny because it was a couple weeks ago, or only a couple weeks ago, I think, that he basically said something like, I don't think I'm playing up to my standard. And he, ever since then, it feels like he's sort of set that as a bar for himself. But this was this to me was his most vintage performance. He, had something like close to 100 passes. He had, a handful of shots. He hit the crossbar once. He had even like sort of like a mini, what did we call it? A Beastquake run when he made that. What were we calling it? Were we calling it a Beastquake run? I don't remember.
Sounds right.
It was like a miniature version, a very miniature version of that. And it didn't come off quite as well either. He didn't score, but he showed signs of just being that same tenacious yet skilled player. And that might be the single most important thing that the Sounders get out of this. If they can get João Paulo to be anywhere near where he was pre-ACL injury, and you add in Pedro de la Vega coming in, and you add in Obed Vargas all of a sudden starting to look like every week, Obed Vargas to me looks like a better player. You can start to see the elements of your Jordan Morris looking like a real number 9, Albert Rusnak looking like a real number 10. All of a sudden, you don't need your defense to be perfect, and you have some building blocks here to make a really competitive team.
Yeah, I think that some of what we're seeing is, especially with players like Obed, right, and just younger guys like that, the benefits of sticking with them through tough times and trying different combinations to figure out what works. I think that JP with Obed and this version of Obed, knowing that Obed is going to be able to do some of the more straightforward attacking stuff, has been able to sort of do a lot of the things defensively that he's been so good at, and still pick out really good passes and be a creator without feeling like he has to do everything. And I think that a lot of the drop off we've seen has been JP feeling like he had to do everything in the center of the pitch. And I don't think he feels that way right now. And I think that that's allowed him to be a lot more free. I think that Rusnak probably is kind of the same situation where he can feel like he doesn't have to. I was thinking about this against Dallas early on when Rusnak was being a little more aggressive, getting forward and actually trying to get towards goal and playing combinations. It feels like he doesn't feel as much pressure to be that protector of possession that he's so good at, but he feels like he's playing a little more freely, and he doesn't feel like he has to be the person that is controlling the game. And it can allow him to take more risks and try to get forward himself a little bit more. And maybe all of this is just confirmation bias. I don't know. But it just really feels like the team feels more comfortable. They feel less individual pressure. They're playing in ways that emphasize each other's strengths a little bit. I think that Jordan Morris playing at the 9 has been part of that. I think
I do too.
Yeah, I think that that his ability to stretch the field, his ability to hold up play, I think has been really valuable. And yeah, I really like this version of this team, at least much more than I liked the March version of the team, you know? And I really want to see them with Pedro de la Vega, and I really want to see them with another attacking piece that they're bringing in. And it's a bummer that might not happen, because I think if you could add just one additional attacking piece, it doesn't even have to be a DP level player. I think just another goal dangerous player that you could add to this collection of players, this could be a team that can make a 2016 type of run. And it's exciting to watch them kind of grow into themselves and take shape, but also knowing that this might be, the last chance JP has to win a trophy with his team.
Right. I think that's right. I think that's another thing that's worth talking about. This is, on some level, this window is not the beginning of a new window for the Sounders. I think they need to sort of treat this like maybe like last year was maybe the closing of one window, but they have not exactly set themselves up for this long window afterwards. I mean, I do think that Christian and Jordan probably have a couple more years left. Maybe Obed is, if Obed keeps playing like this, he's probably going to play himself off the team. Frankly, yeah. He's playing that well. Maybe Josh Atencio's around. I guess I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in this, but I do think there's something to be said about if they can add a piece. This can be a competitive team. This can be a trophy chasing team. And I mean, I'm at the point where, look, I don't expect the Sounders to open up the wallet and make a big transfer this offseason. But I do think it's really important that they do something. Like, I don't think they can afford to do nothing. And I don't mean like Adam Moffat. Like, they got to go out and get a player who is at least a potential difference maker. Now, that's maybe not I've been throwing around a lot of names in our Discord. And, one of the ones that I thought was interesting was a Johnny Russell. I realized that a lot of folks aren't as thrilled with that, but someone that has upside, who's probably a rental, but that can create more competition at one of the offensive positions. That's what they got to go out and get. I don't know that they're going to necessarily find a automatic starter with the budget that they apparently have, but give me someone who at least can plausibly be that person.
Yeah, I feel like they have to do something at least that impactful. I think Johnny Russell is actually a 0 for this team. I don't think he does anything.
Fair enough.
But I understand like that caliber. Like, the problem is that he's a 0 for this team, but that's part of why he's available, right?
Right.
And so it's like finding a guy who's available that actually helps you. And it's just so frustrating, because I feel like if they could go sign like a Victor Rodriguez type, right? Like, if they could find a way to make a signing like that happen, and they have
a player who is available on a free. Let's keep it like this is there are players like that available on frees.
Yeah. They just have to eat some money somewhere or make an aggressive move and it just doesn't seem like they're willing to do it. And I think, like you said, I think that the Sounders think of themselves as a club that doesn't rebuild, they reload, right? Mm-hmm. And so they say, yeah, we're going to lose Raúl, we might lose Rusnak, we might lose JP, but we're going to bring in the guys that are going to be the next core. And they're probably right. But this team didn't win an MLS Cup for 7 years. They took 13 years to win the CCL, which is all they were trying to do from day one. It's tough to win big trophies in this league, in any league, but I mean, it's not, you can't take it for granted. And you might not, this next core that you build probably won't be as special as the core that you've had. And I just feel like you want to maximize the number of trophies you win and give yourself every chance you have with these players who aren't going to be around that much longer. Who, I mean, if I'm Craig Weibel, am I bringing back Joao Paulo? I don't think I am. Most likely, I think it's good to make a clean break with guys sometimes, maybe a little earlier than you would like to, because I think we've in the last couple of seasons seen the other side of that equation and how it can turn out poorly. I don't know if I'm bringing back Rusnak, but they're good players that with the right pieces are good enough to challenge for another MLS Cup. And it's frustrating to feel like maybe they're not going to take advantage of that.
Yeah. It is. But we right now, at least it feels a little like I'm less worried right now than I was about that than I was before.
Yeah.
I still want them to make a move. I still really, really want them to make a move.
Right.
But I am at least a little bit more feeling like I can stomach watching this team.
Right. I think there was a point where it was like, if they don't make a move, they are not going to make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
And I definitely don't feel that way now. Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think this is a playoff. I feel confident that this is probably a top 7 playoff team. Almost no matter, like it would, the wheels would have to come off pretty significantly at this point. There was also some good news this week or today at training. The one good news the best piece of good news, Alex Roldan, it appears to be just about cleared of the concussion protocol, which at least gives the Sounders another piece to compete with. And then Pedro de la Vega full into training, and even more encouraging than that, Brian Schmetzer said, I have no doubt, I believe was the actual quote, I have no doubt that De La Vega will be able to feature this weekend, which was a little surprising. I don't know if he was maybe a little, he wanted to get in some good news in today's presser. So maybe that was him overreaching, but that's what he said.
He did. He said he had no doubt he'd be available, which
yeah, I guess
first I thought that was a clever little, I think there's at least a chance that he makes the bench, but he doesn't play. But man, even just seeing his name on the graphic would be nice. And hey, if he doesn't play, he can't get hurt again. So, there's that too. But yeah, it definitely did kind of feel like he wanted to sneak in some good news at the end of what had been a pretty unpleasant in a lot of ways press conference.
Yeah. Which we may as well talk about. I will tease the next segment. That's a good transition, I think. If you are online today, or you probably know by now that Raúl Ruidíaz and Nouhou are effectively, not literally, but effectively suspended for the week. And we're going to get into that, explain what seems to be going on there in the next segment. And so why don't we go ahead and take a break? We'll come back. We'll do a whole segment on that situation. And you're listening to Nos Audietas. Welcome back to Sounder at Heart. We are going to spend this segment basically talking about the whole situation with Raúl Ruidíaz and Nouhou, who the Sounders said the official line is this. They were not at training today. When we asked Schmetzer about why they weren't at training, he just said it's an internal matter and didn't really get into it. He made we asked some more kind of follow-up questions to get a little bit more insight into it. And he did clarify that it definitely was not because Ruidíaz, sort of did the whole point of his back thing before or after he scored. And even though Schmetzer acknowledged that was probably directed at him or at the coaching staff in general, but he said that he's a big boy. He can handle that. No big deal. He also made sure to point out that it was not an issue. It was not some sort of punishment for Ruidíaz and Morris getting into an argument on the field. Apparently around the 84th minute or so, a ball went out. Morris did not, he just kind of ran back to defense. He didn't pick it up and put it on the spot like you oftentimes do when you're trying to rush a team. The Sounders were chasing a goal. Raúl made sure to tell Jordan he would like him to do better at that. They got into a bit of an argument, but this is the kind of thing that happens. No harm, no foul. And sort of that's where Schmetzer essentially left it. We also talked to Stefan Fry. He also said he wasn't really that interested in talking about it. We also asked him a few questions about sort of trying to get an idea of it. He thought he was really happy with the effort that Ruidíaz showed in the game. No issues there. People saying nice stuff. But we did a little bit more digging, Nico Moreno and I. And if you read our story, you probably know what we're going next. It turns out probably what happened is, both if a lot of people noticed this at the game, neither Nouhou nor Ruidíaz joined the Sounders for their acknowledgement of the fans after the game, which I don't know how huge of a deal that is. But when Brian, I guess, got back to the locker room and he was giving his post-game speech, it ended up being this big argument over that essentially, like, my understanding is maybe Brian insinuated that Ruidíaz and Nouhou were sort of being disrespectful to not do that, and that started a bigger argument. And the end result of that was both players are basically banished from training this week, and they won't be playing against Chicago Fire. Not exactly. It's kind of a bummer in a way.
Yeah.
Right. That this is what we're talking about after a really successful week, but yet I don't know. Somehow, I don't know. For some reason I'm not as worried about it as I would have been a week ago.
Yeah, I'm not really either. I think that this kind of stuff happens a lot, and maybe it doesn't get to this level, but where it becomes obvious that something is happening, right? But I think that there are probably squabbles pretty regularly. This one sounds not great if you've got, 2 players getting suspended. And yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, it's a bummer. I really hope it doesn't become a distraction that hurts the team, but I'm not really that worried about it. And, it sucks because I thought Raúl against Houston as a sub, pretty much every time he's come on as a sub.
Yeah, I think he's looked great as a sub.
And it's like, man, can you not connect the dots here? I feel like we had this discussion about Nico last year, where he ended up dropping out of the starting lineup, and every time he came on as a sub, he looked great. And his position seemed to be, look, I'm playing great. Why am I not starting? And it's like, well, there's a causality going on. Like there is a relationship between you not starting and you playing well when you play.
Yeah.
And, this will shock you and our listeners to hear, I am not as good of a athlete as Raúl Ruidíaz. I've never reached that level of any profession, let alone professional soccer.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's like to have to confront that, to confront the fact that you're not the player that you used to be, and that, maybe you're better suited to a less prominent role. I'm sure it sucks really bad because it's hard for a lot of guys to deal with, but it would just be really nice if they could recognize, hey, this is the stage in my career that I'm at right now, and I can be really effective and I can feel like the old Raúl Ruidíaz if I'm coming in off the bench.
Yeah.
But that doesn't tend to be the way it goes. And
it is not the way it tends to go, unfortunately.
Yeah. And with Nouhou, man, I don't know. I love Nouhou, but he gets this. He has stuff happen like this quite a bit, and it's
Nouhou. This is at least the second time this year that he kind of got semi-suspended. Like, it's not an official suspension. If it was an official suspension, they would, I think, have their pay docked, and it would be a whole MLS at PA situation. This is not that, but he also got sort of like semi-suspended when he was on a road trip, and he just like apparently showed up late to a film session. And this is unfortunately kind of like, I don't know what let's put the Ruidíaz thing aside real fast, and we can kind of maybe dispatch with the Nouhou thing is dumb.
Yeah.
This is a player making a really bad decision. He was apparently mad that he got pulled off in the 73rd minute. Sounders were down 2-0. They win the game 3-2. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Look at that maybe and think maybe that wasn't such a bad call. Like, what? You're a defense first player. You got pulled out for a more offensive player.
Right.
What are you upset about?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to get pulled out of games, play better. It is that simple. And
I mean, if the Sounders are chasing a goal, Nouhou probably should be pulled out of the game.
yeah, absolutely. He's not a goal contributor. And he has to know that, right? Like he has to know his limitations to some degree.
You'd like to think.
You'd like to think, maybe not. I don't know, but it's very stupid. And it's not. It's the kind of thing that it's like whatever. This is just part of the sport. But that had happened in this game. Like if Nouhou gets pulled and they lose 2-1, and he behaves this way, he gets mad about getting pulled out. All right, whatever. It's still dumb. Be a professional. Respect your coach's decision. Talk with him about it at training on Monday. I don't know, but whatever. But to do it after they come back and win in that fashion,
the most feel good moment of the season.
Yeah, it sucks. And I try not to. I don't know. I try not to assume that I know everything that I need to know to make judgment calls in situations like this, but it's just really hard for me to envision a scenario where Nouhou's just not being a little petulant, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like he saw an opening and he sort of wanted to, I got a beef too kind of situation.
Right.
Like I got something else to say. And it's pretty annoying. So I don't know. We'll put that one aside. The funny thing is, I don't know that the Sounders really missed Nouhou this week. Chicago Fire are not a totally awful team, but they are not a team on paper. This is a game that the Sounders have to win.
Yeah,
they might not win. Don't get me wrong. Weirder things have happened, but this is a team with one road win this year, and that's over Toronto FC, who is in the midst of completely falling apart, which I would like to point out I predicted, maybe not on the show, but to anyone who would listen. But they are not a good team. They're just a 4. They're 4, 8-4, something like that. And this is a game on paper the Sounders should absolutely win. Reed Baker Whiting presumably gets the start in this one. I would think this is set up for, they didn't maybe need Nouhou anyway. And if Nouhou may have played himself off if Reed plays well in this game, there's a world where Reed is now the starter.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if they play 3 at the back and Bell has a great game, I guess.
Right. Well, Bell is, but
he's with Jamaica, right?
He's with Jamaica right now, but there's a world where, John Bell kind of takes his spot. It's between John Bell and Reed Baker Whiting, they sort of take his spot.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that just seemed dumb. The Ruidíaz thing, I'm a little bit more sympathetic because from what I understand, maybe it wasn't as communicated to, Raúl was, I think, frustrated that there were 3 games last week. He didn't start any of them. He didn't actually, he didn't start any of them. He didn't play against Minnesota in part because he wasn't needed in that game.
Yeah.
But I suppose there's I'm sure you could argue that the Sounders that Schmetzer could have done a better job of communicating sort of the plan to Ruidíaz. And in light of communicating that plan, it felt like he'd just sort of been demoted to super sub without really any communication on that. I can imagine that maybe being the scenario, but it sounds like he was upset when he found out he wasn't starting on Saturday while Danny Musovski was starting. And to his credit, Schmetzer sounds like he gave him the day off on Friday and just said, why don't you gather yourself and come back and have a good game? And he comes back and he has a good game. He gets out, he's frustrated in the game. He's fired up, but it all works out. And instead of being happy about that, he decides, I'm going to double down and turn this into a thing. I don't know that he was going to start anyway. He certainly wasn't going to, I doubt he was going to start anyway against the Chicago Fire. but he probably would have been useful.
Yeah. I think that there's a way to make the point he wanted to make and express the frustration that he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
That's probably a little more productive, but I'm kind of
Probably.
I'm kind of with you where this just seems like a shitty situation where everybody could have done a little better,
Yeah.
And it's tough. I mean, Brian talked about that in his in his press conference, where he just said, like, this is like a really difficult phase in guys' careers, and it's a difficult conversation for everybody to have, and there's not really a good way to do it. And it's true. I mean, like, it's one of the hard things about being in his position, and it's one of the difficult things about pro sports. And I think especially when you're a guy like Raúl, who is one of the legends of this club, and you're still scoring goals. He probably doesn't think about it. Well, it's not sustainable, right? I
probably doesn't look at it that way, but that's
right.
Whatever.
Yeah, but that's it's tough, and I'm really hopeful that it doesn't derail anything, no matter what the outcome is. If the outcome is Raúl never plays a game for the Sounders again, which I think is super unlikely, but if that's the outcome, I hope it's handled in a way that doesn't prove as a distraction. If the solution here is to give him another shot at the starting position, I really hope that we see 30-minute Raúl 90 minutes more frequently.
Right. Yeah.
I also don't think that's likely. So I really hope that he and Brian can come to an understanding of, you're still an important player on this team, but we think that this is a better role for you, and Raúl can accept that and they can bury the hatchet. I think that's the best outcome. Absolutely. And I trust Brian's ability to get it there. And I think Raúl is ultimately a good pro and cares about the team and cares about winning. And this is just a bump in the road, hopefully.
Yeah, that's my hope too. As of now, I think that's probably the most likely outcome. Hopefully in 2 weeks, this is all beyond us and whatever. But it was kind of a bummer to be dealing with this on a week where it should have felt like, to me at least, it felt like it should have been more of a celebratory week. But
it is kind of fun to have some drama again, though. It's been a while.
It is fun to have some drama. I always say, total selfishly, the worst thing that can happen to the Sounders is that they're bad and boring.
Yeah.
But if they're good and exciting, that's the opposite, and that's the best. And so, or good and interesting, I should say.
Yeah.
And right now they're good. They're good and interesting. So,
right. Yeah. Maybe a little more interesting than good, but
yeah, right. Yeah, that's okay.
Not the good kind of interesting, but
No, that's good and kind of interesting is fine. Like, or I'm sorry, interesting and kind of good is maybe in a weird way almost better than really good, because it's hard to be really good and really interesting. Like that's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
Because if you're really good, it gets can kind of be a little boring.
Yeah.
But that's probably a good place to call it, Aaron. Thank you for doing this with me. We're still trying to figure out exactly how we're gonna make this show click, but I hope we are finding a good balance.
Yeah. You do something for 13 years one way, and then you try to change it up, and it's
So we also want to make our new friends at Lobbing Scorchers feel good about things, and make sure that we have space. And I think there's plenty of space for all of us here, so I'm not worried about it. But we'll play around with different ideas and different formats. And someone suggested that we do another long form thing like the red card wedding. Who knows?
Yeah,
crazy stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know. But thank you, of course, to our subscribers. We recently passed 2,500 paid subscribers on Sounder Heart, which is wild, absolutely wild to me. But it's letting us do all kinds of fun stuff and bring in new voices and provide value to you, our subscribers. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you, of course, to Full Pull Wines as well. With that, I'm signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is Nos Adietis. And remember, you will never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.